George Springer was supposed to be one of the players carrying the Toronto Blue Jays offense this season. Instead, he's become one of the biggest concerns surrounding the team. And right now, the Blue Jays desperately need that to change. Because as Toronto continues falling behind in the American League East standings, the pressure surrounding Springer is only getting larger with every passing game. The Blue Jays have won just 3 of their last 10 games, and the situation is becoming difficult to ignore. At this point in the season, they already sit 9.5 games behind the Tampa Bay Rays in the division race. That's not where this team expected to be. Not with this payroll. Not with these expectations. And definitely not with veterans like George Springer still occupying major roles in the lineup. When the Blue Jays signed Springer to his massive $150 million contract, they believed they were bringing in a proven winner, a playoff-tested superstar capable of transforming the offense both statistically and emotionally. At his best, Springer did exactly that. He brought leadership. He brought power. He brought postseason experience. And when healthy, he still looked like one of the most dangerous hitters in baseball. Even last season, Springer reminded everyone he could still produce at a high level. He finished 2025 with 32 home runs and an impressive .959 OPS, giving Toronto exactly the type of offensive production they needed from a veteran-designated hitter. But this season has looked completely different. And honestly, it's becoming impossible for the Blue Jays to keep surviving offensively without more production from him. Part of the issue has clearly been health. Springer missed time earlier this season with a fractured toe, which is already a difficult injury for any baseball player, especially someone trying to generate power consistently at the plate. Then, incredibly, only a few games after returning, Springer got hit directly on that same still-healing toe by another pitch. At that point, it became obvious he still wasn't fully healthy. And to be fair, that absolutely matters, because lower body injuries can completely impact a hitter's timing, balance, and ability to drive the baseball consistently. For a veteran player already in his mid-30s, recovering from something like that becomes even more complicated. But despite the injuries, the Blue Jays still need more. Much more. Before landing on the injured list, Springer already carried a disappointing .661 OPS. Since returning, things have become even worse. He's posted just a .552 OPS since coming back to the lineup, and the lack of power has become one of the biggest concerns for Toronto's offense overall. Through 107 plate appearances this season, Springer has hit only 2 home runs. 2. For a player expected to provide middle-of-the-order power, those numbers simply aren't enough. Especially now, because the Blue Jays are already dealing with injuries elsewhere in the lineup. Alejandro Kirk and Addison Barger both being unavailable has created even more pressure on the remaining hitters to carry the offense. That's why Springer's struggles feel magnified. Toronto doesn't have the luxury of waiting forever for him to slowly figure things out. The lineup needs impact production immediately. And unfortunately, Springer's overall numbers this season reflect just how difficult things have become. A negative WAR, minimal power, inconsistent contact, and at times, he's looked like a player still searching for his timing at the plate. The biggest issue may actually be his current role on the roster. At this stage of his career, Springer is no longer expected to provide major defensive value consistently. The Blue Jays are primarily using him as a designated hitter now, which means his value almost entirely depends on offensive production. That changes the expectations completely. If a player is occupying the DH spot nearly every day, the bat has to produce. There's really no way around it. The Blue Jays need extra base hits. They need power. They need someone capable of changing games with one swing. Right now, Springer simply hasn't been that player consistently. And unfortunately for Toronto, the timing couldn't be worse. Because the American League East has become brutal once again. The Rays continue winning. The Orioles remain dangerous. The Yankees are always competitive. Every loss matters. Every offensive slump matters. And the Blue Jays cannot afford key veterans underperforming if they realistically want to stay in the playoff race. That's why so many people around baseball still believe Springer could become one of the most important players on Toronto's roster over the next few weeks. Because if he finds his swing again, everything changes offensively. Even at 36 years old, Springer still has the ability to completely transform a lineup when he gets hot. We've seen throughout his career how dangerous he can become during offensive surges. The confidence spreads through the entire team. Pitchers attack the lineup differently. Opposing teams suddenly have to respect the middle of the order again. That's the version of Springer the Blue Jays desperately need right now. And honestly, there's probably still belief inside the organization that he can find that level again. Veteran hitters sometimes take longer to recover rhythm after injuries. Timing matters. Confidence matters. And one hot stretch offensively can completely reshape narratives around struggling players. But at the same time, the pressure is real. Because this isn't just about Springer individually anymore. This is about Toronto's playoff hopes. If the Blue Jays want to climb back into the division race, or even remain firmly in the wild card picture, the offense has to improve significantly. And that improvement likely starts with George Springer. The Blue Jays invested $150 million in him because they believed he could deliver during moments exactly like this. Now, they need him to prove it again. Because right now, Toronto's offense looks incomplete without him producing at a high level. And if Springer doesn't eventually break out offensively, the Blue Jays season could continue slipping further away very quickly.